I believe it's important to treat people as seekers who are genuinely reaching out for truth quite often, and therefore present the gospel, present the truth to them in love. There was a great big turning point in my life years ago when somebody did that toward me. I was a teacher of Kundalini Yoga at 4 universities, and I had about 300 students under me. I ran a yoga ashram in Tampa, Florida, and I was a personal student of Yogi Bhajan and one of his first student teachers in the United States. So I've experienced that aspect of spirituality in depth. And I would dare to say that no Christian should ever involve himself or herself in the practice of yoga. I have an article on my website, thetruelight.net, where I go into 5 reasons I no longer practice Hatha Yoga, under the category various articles and FAQ. Down toward the bottom, 5 reasons I no longer practice Hatha Yoga. And I go into much more detail there than I can on this interview, but I thought it would be really good. I'm actually scrolling through that article right now just to give you the overview. Number 1, spiritual roots. Number 2, spiritual perspective. Number 3, spiritual transfer. Number 4, spiritual intrigue. And number 5, spiritual endorsement. Now, I know it's not understandable yet just by mentioning those titles, so let me elaborate. Spiritual roots. Hatha Yoga, just the practice of the physical asanas, the exercises, are not just physical exercises. They're based on the idea that these exercises are going to open up and awaken the chakras and something called the Kundalini.
Now you said Hatha Yoga. Is all all the popular yoga out today the same, or is Hatha Yoga different? Can we just say yoga, or is there little differences?
Well, Hatha Yoga is what most people practice when they go to a yoga studio, especially if they're not into the spiritual side of yoga. They're doing Hatha Yoga exercises. Unknown to a lot of people, first of all, this practice is inseparable from Hinduism. Even celebrated Hindu authorities, one of the chief editors of Hinduism Today, says that it is impossible to separate yoga from Hinduism. It's so much a part of that worldview. And yoga was designed and is utilized still to awaken the Kundalini and to open up the chakras, which I no longer believe in. I do not believe in chakras. I do not believe in the Kundalini. But let me focus on the latter for just a moment. Supposedly, the Kundalini is a coiled energy at the base of the spine that is dormant. It is the divine essence within every human being. And through yoga asanas and through meditation, that Kundalini force is supposedly awakened, and it travels up the spine to the crown chakra, where the person, the devotee, the advocate of yoga, leaves the body, so to speak, and merges with divine consciousness. And that person becomes consciously aware of his or her own divinity. Now, one thing that's very eye-opening is to see that often gurus and swamis will warn their disciples that if they don't live a certain disciplined kind of life, an awakening of the Kundalini can be very detrimental and can result in very dark occultic powers being awakened, or some people have even gone insane because of the awakening of the Kundalini. People are involved in yoga. There is always the chance, even if they're just doing exercises and not the meditation, they're in an atmosphere where this spiritual transfer can take place. And that's another one of those 5 points. Because just suppose you're a Christian and you're going to a yoga studio and you're sitting underneath a teacher who is not Christian, but given over to a New Age worldview. and believes in all of these aspects of Hinduism, then you are under the influence of a power that is not the Holy Spirit, and there can be a subtle transfer of spirits that can bring a lot of spiritual confusion into a person's life. And that's a very important point. Well, mantras are based on the idea that God is just an impersonal life force, and that in order to manipulate and control that life force, you've got to enter into this vibration level that's created by intoning these words a certain way, and it's a ridiculous way of how can I say it, of pulling God down into just a mechanical kind of force that can be controlled by the right incantation. And that's not the way God is. You have a relationship with God, and when you pray in a very natural flow of words and ideas that make sense. You're not coercing the force to do your bidding. You're celebrating your relationship with God, who's very involved in your life and wants the best for you. And so it's a distortion of the personality of God that makes people involve themselves in those practices. And I've had Christians say, well, when it comes to the point in the class where they all start chanting Om, then I don't participate. I just say the name Jesus. But again, you're in the presence of a demonic force, so a spiritual transfer can take place. Your presence there is an endorsement of that approach. So spiritual endorsement has taken place. And if you're not careful, then this can result in creating curiosity or intrigue in you, where you begin to delve into these approaches, and before long your gospel belief system is eroded.